is up, people? Give them a hand again. They did awesome. They did a fantastic job. It's a real treat to have people come in every once in a while and do that with us. So I am T-minus less than a week until my little girl gets married. That is so... Friday night, man, and everything changes. You're taking the dog too, right? Perfect. All right. So that is awesome. Well, we got some ground to cover today, so let's go ahead and pray together. We're going to get set up for this and see where Jesus takes us as we wrap up our series in Colossians. Let's go ahead and pray together. Jesus, I thank you for this little letter that has kind of stood the test of time, not simply because it's in the Bible, but because it really is practical for life. It is a roadmap on how we as a culture of Christ, your culture, could then be in the culture of our world and seek to be a transformational change agent, And so I pray that we will continue to keep that mindset as we close out today, and maybe particular to the message today, that we will remember that it is our privilege, not simply responsibility or commandment, but it is our privilege to be able to bring you to the world around us. It's our privilege to share you. It's our privilege to represent you. And so I pray that we will take that to heart, that it will have an ownership in our lives where we are eager to figure out the little nooks and crannies of which we can operate in to share you more. And so I pray that you will inspire us and enable us and encourage us to be people that bring you to the culture by way of just sharing you and loving you so much and being so loyal to you that we rub off onto those around us. So we ask that you would teach us today, guide us, and draw us into yourself in those ways. We love you and thank you in your perfect name. Amen. So I have a belief, and my belief, and this is a true conviction, though I don't think I always do a good job of communicating my conviction, but my conviction is, and I believe, that Jesus is in fact the hope of the world. I believe Jesus is the hope of the world. And I believe the church is like an embassy that Jesus has in the world to communicate that hope. And because Jesus is the hope of the world, the church is an embassy of that hope in the world. That means each and every one of us are ambassadors that go out into our world to communicate that hope with people who may not have hope, may have misplaced hope, may feel like they had hope but lost hope, and we bring that to them. So as a church, what we like to say is that we are everyday missionaries or missional theologians. Now, we use that phrase a lot around here, missional theologians. If somebody said, hey, what does Redemption Church hope to build? If we were building something, we want to build missional theologians. And what we mean by this is that every one of us sees ourselves every day as a missionary. That's the missional part. That we see ourselves as people going out into a culture, just like a missionary does, and we're trying to figure out, how do I connect Jesus and a proper portrait of him to the world that I live in? That means we're just missionaries. We're missional. In the same way that God sent Jesus into the world, so Jesus sends us into the world, right? So this is what we want to do. But then we're also theologians. And when we say that, we don't mean it in the fanciest way you could take that word. What we're trying to communicate is that it's our job to give a proper portrait of who God is in a world where he is oftentimes misrepresented or skewed or misunderstood. And so we want to know him so well that we can communicate him with clarity when we're out in the everyday spaces of life. And so that's what we mean by missional theologians. And we want to take this calling to heart, right? We don't want to simply say it's our responsibility to be missional theologians. We want to say, man, I want it to be my eager desperation to live in that way. Because when it comes down to it, even the way we started off the book of Colossians is we said it is our responsibility and our kind of objective purpose to live the truth of the Bible, but then also in that to communicate the grace of the Bible. So the truth is for us, but the grace is what we want to communicate to those estranged from God so that they can taste of the grace of God and then from that live according to the truth of God. So our whole purpose here today is to talk about how we live the truth, but we share the grace as missional theologians so that we can be a culture to the culture. So If you have a Bible or a Bible app, you can open up to Colossians chapter 4, verse 2. Or if you have our app on your phone, we have notes. Again, I'm going to push these every single week. The notes have been a huge addition. That is the number one most used thing on our app now is the notes section. And what's nice about that is all the verses are going to be right there for you. It's all in one place. You can fill things in as you go and keep track of things and email those to yourself as you see fit. So again, this is just, a little tool for us to be able to help you grow and learn more. It's that we want something for you more than we want something from you. And so we want for you to be able to really take this in and let it sink in so that it might then be something that really plays out in your life. Now, by way of refresher to Colossians chapter 4, what we've seen throughout the book of the Colossians here is that we've seen who they and we are in Christ. We've seen that in the first part of the book. We've also seen in the book how they live through Christ, and therefore how we are to live through Christ. But as it closes up today, we see what we are to do for Christ. And as we do, it's Paul sharing his heart. This little last section is less instructional, though there's a little bit of instruction, and it's way more personal for Paul. He's wrapping up this little tiny correspondence, and he's getting to the point where he's like, and here's a couple other things I'm going to ask for you guys to do on my behalf. And yet, as he writes this, I think there are things in there that we can all take to heart, that we go like, oh man, that's instructional for me, even though it's by way of example. And so we're going to look at what I'm going to consider to be 8 little nuggets this morning. 8 little nuggets in your notes of ways in which we can be missional theologians, in which we can be a culture to the culture, ways in which we can share our faith with those who may either have frustration at our faith, have no faith of their own, maybe are curious in some way. It's just ways that we can do this. And it's not going to always be like, here's 8 tools. It's not tools, it's more a way of life as we navigate toward trying to figure out how to share our faith with those around us. And so I'm going to start with number 1 in your notes, this first little nugget of how to be a missional theologian. To be a missional theologian, we must have an assertive prayer focus. Assertive. Right? Not just kind of when it's convenient, if I think about it. No, there has to be this thing in us that says, you know what, this is such a priority. It's such a preoccupation that I want to be committed to the idea that every day I am praying assertively that God would work and move in my life and the lives of others. And this is why Paul starts off by encouraging the Colossians when he says, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. Notice the words steadfastly and watchful. See, this is why I say assertive. Steadfast and watchful. See, these are critical things because I know even in my own life there are times where, man, I'm really in it, man. I'm praying a lot. I'm really giving it to God. I'm really asking Him to do some big things. But then there's other times where I get sidetracked and I'm just thinking, but I'm not praying. I'm problem solving, but I'm not praying. And in those times where I'm thinking and problem solving but not praying, guess what? Not a lot happens in cool ways. It's when I'm in that sweet spot of this steadfastness, being watchful and thanksgiving. I mean, you just see that right there, right? It's just so clear. Faithful, watchful, thankful. That's to be our prayers. And here's the thing I've also noticed about these in my life sometimes. It's easy to be prayerful at times. In other words, it's easy to ask. It's sometimes even easy to watch and see if God's going to answer what I ask. But you know what's tough for me is thankful. Sometimes I'm just not thankful. I'm asking for a lot of stuff. I'm waiting on a lot of stuff, but I'm not thankful for a lot of stuff. And what I have learned over the course of time is that this is the secret ingredient for life and for prayer and for being a missional theologian. Because what I find is that thankfulness unlocks joy. And joy makes you resilient and strong for life. And so in those seasons when we're really trying to say, all right, Jesus, I want to be focused on you, not only should we be watchful and prayerful, but we really should be thankful. Going to Him all the time, thank you for this, and thank you for that, and thank you that you made this happen, and thank you made that happen. It's easy to be thankful maybe sometimes when God answers your prayers in the way that you want, maybe sometimes when He doesn't. It's hard to be thankful. Paul would say be thankful anyway, right? Tapping into that thankful spirit. And so Paul puts that in there intentionally. You'll see throughout a lot of his letters, he loves to make much of thankfulness. And so again, if we are to be effective in this whole enterprise of sharing our faith with others, we want to be thankful because thankfulness leads to joyfulness and joyfulness leads to strength. And people see that in our lives and they're like, there's something different about you. You don't get pulled into the undercurrent of the conditions or problems of life. You have something different. You transcend those things. That comes back again to prayerful, watchful, and thankful. In this, though, we see Paul also is purposeful. He's purposeful. So in this request for prayer, we see it coupled to another thing, which is number 2 in your notes. The missional theologian must have an intentional life agenda. He says, I want you Colossians to be praying all the time, and he says it to us as well. I want you to be praying all the time, thankful all the time, watching and asking all the time. But at the same time, he says, pray also for us that God may open to us a door for the word. Now, I'll tell you what I dig about this. Let's keep our context in mind. Paul is in prison. His life circumstance stinks, which is already pretty telling that in verse 2 he says, don't forget thankful. Right? He's this dude that's thankful in prison. He wrote to another group called the Philippians, and he explains to them the source of his joy. It's Christ in all things. But here he's in prison, and of all the things he could ask people to pray for, what's he pray for? An opportunity to share Jesus. He does not pray that the doors of my cell will open mysteriously one night. In fact, when that happened, he stuck around. Why? To share his faith. He didn't care about the cell door being open. He cared about a heart being opened. And so Paul has this life agenda that says everything I do, no matter what the conditions or circumstance, I want to be able to effectively share Jesus in the middle of that. And so he says, man, pray for open doors. And I can guarantee you, every one of us have people in our lives where there are doors that the Holy Spirit is working on and opening if we're there and aware and care enough to say, I'm going to take the opportunity to step through that door that's open. Some of our friends have doors of the mind where they have questions, and we can answer maybe some of those questions. Others have doors of the heart where we see in their life there's something void, something empty, something missing. They know it's missing, and we can say, hey, I have this idea of my faith that really deals with voids of the heart being fulfilled. And so we kind of step through and take advantage of that door of the heart. Some people have doors that are doors of hurt. And they've been hurt by Christians, by the church, by life, by circumstance, by spouse, friends, family, whatever. And we can then bring healing to their hurt. That's a door. There's all sorts of doors. Some people have doors of anxiety, and we can say, hey, here's a message of peace. Some people just have doors where they say, life just seems still kind of bland. There's something else that I think I should be able to tap into it. I don't know what it is, and then they look at our lives and they go, but you seem to have a fulfillment that I don't understand. What is that? It's just a sensibility door. But it comes down to us wanting to see those doors, to live intentionally, to say, that is the big priority of my life. And again, I think it's very easy for all of us, myself included, to just sort of live life and pass by those doors. Or to live life and we never say, God, open a door. Now, there's going to be some people in our lives where the door isn't open, they're hostile. And you know what? We just be faithful and move on to the next door. But if the Holy Spirit's working, man, it's just as simple as being attentive to that and being available to engage whatever door that God may open. But it comes back to saying, I want to have an intentional life agenda by which I care enough to take the opportunity to share. Now, if you go a step further, Paul isn't simply asking for an open door, but he's concerned about how he would share in the midst of that door being opened. And so that's a little nugget again for us. Number 3 in your notes, to be a missional theologian, we must have a heart that wants to make things simple. Simple. See, this is part of what Paul continues in his prayer request. Pray also for us that God may open a door for the word. Why? To declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison, that I may make it clear, which is how I ought to actually speak. Now, I don't know if you noticed this in the passage, but that's a weird deal to say, I want to make a mystery clear. That's kind of tough, right? I mean, mysteries are inherently difficult to decipher. So why would he say it's a mystery of Christ that I want to make clear? What's the mystery that he needs to clarify? Well, textually, there's all sorts of things going on there. But if I was to try to distill it down and say, what is the real thing? What's the secret? Let's not call it a mystery. Let's call it a secret for a second. What is the secret that Paul needs to clarify and we need to clarify to anybody that doesn't know Jesus? Here's how I would maybe make it simple. I would say, throughout life, people are trying to figure out what's the secret to happiness? What's the secret to contentment? What's the secret to fulfillment? What's the secret to having everything I ever wanted internally and emotionally inside my life? What's the secret to having that bliss, right? Everybody has that kind of question mark. And so they try a lot of things trying to figure out what's the secret to success and happiness. And so some try relationships, and some try sexuality, and some try education, and some try money, and some try career. People try all sorts of things trying to figure it out, and they sometimes have a little bit of gratification, but they don't have real satisfaction. And so they're backed into, why is there something missing? Why is there, I'm always wanting more? And here is the secret to life. Here's the mystery revealed. Life is not engineered. Ready? Life is not engineered for us to have deep, meaningful contentment solely by the tools of this life. It's just not engineered that way. The world wears down, it breaks down, it disappoints, it lets us down, it's precarious no matter what thing we're seeking. You can't have any guarantees in life. But then the other part is we have this insatiable nature in our soul that wants and wants and wants. It's like our hearts are like black holes that suck in but never are quite fulfilled. And now Paul rolls in and says, let me make it really clear. Life will never fill your bucket. Only Jesus can fill your bucket. Only Jesus can solve those things. Only Jesus can bring the contentment or the peace or the joy or the sense of focus to life in ways that nothing else can. That isn't to say that all those other things are bad or sinful. It can be, depending on how we treat them. But they're never going to complete us. And so Paul's like, I just need to make that message simple. I just have to make that the clarifying mark, that when Jesus steps into your life, everything changes. You look at Paul's life before Jesus, he had it all. He had pedigree, he had the right resume, he had a good job, he was well known in the community, he had everything he ever wanted, but he was incomplete. And then he was exposed to the mystery of Christ, and from that, everything changed. And when he lost everything in his life, he still felt like he had everything he ever wanted and needed, because he had Christ. And so to keep it simple is for us to simply say to those who may be searching, may not be searching, doesn't matter, the message is always the same. Here's what I know, life with Jesus is better. Just keeping it simple. I just know that Jesus fulfills in ways that nothing else can't, keeping it simple. And I can attest to this in my own personal life. I mean, I have those times, and I share with you guys often, kind of my own kind of peaks and valleys life, but I have those times in my life where, I'm getting up in the morning and I'm reading my Bible, and actually one of the things I love to do now is listen to my Bible. I listen to it a lot. I'm just screaming through the Old Testament right now, listening to it in free time or when I'm driving or whatever else. And so I'm in those kinds of seasons, and then I'm praying a lot throughout the day and everything. When I'm in that place, you know what? Life is really, really content. Life is really content. Even when stuff is hard or bad. The hard and bad stuff I face very differently. But when I am not reading my Bible much, and I'm not praying much, and like I said earlier, I'm thinking more than praying, I'm problem solving more than praying, I get a little neglectful of God's word, I'm not listening to it so much, I'm not making those investments. Even when things are good, I manage to make them bad. Somehow. I become a pessimist, I become negative, I become unhelpful, I become worrisome, I get concerned about the future, whatever it is. And so there is just this dramatic difference. It's like Jekyll and Hyde, but it's me, and it's like when I'm tight with Jesus, life is better. And when I'm not, I feel that black hole thing in me start to pull and want fulfillment, and it isn't there, and then I get nasty. And so it is not helpful. And so, thinking about this here, it just comes back to, how do you keep it simple? You just say, listen, here's what I know. Life of Jesus is better. Let me explain to you how there's this one person that came into my life and changed everything. I think about this in John chapter 9. There's a scene where Jesus heals a man that was blind, and all of the religious leaders who were critics of Jesus all come to the scene, and they're quizzing the guy. Why did he do this? And why did he do that? And what did he say? And what did he do? And the guy's like, I don't know. I can't answer any of your questions. Here's what I can tell you. I used to be blind, and now I can see. It's the only thing I can tell you. I don't have an answer for every question you have, every dilemma you're facing. I can just tell you I was blind and now I see. I think that's how simple sometimes our message needs to be to people. We get so concerned that we have to have every apologetic answer for every conceivable issue. And I go back to, listen, if the Holy Spirit's working in the life of a person, all of those answers, we don't have to know those as much as we need to know the one, which is, hey, I know him. His name's Jesus. He changed my life. He can change yours too. I'm going to keep it simple. That can be a powerful thing when God's already working in the life of a person. In fact, that was a friend of mine I was talking to. He's like, when I became a believer, it wasn't like I was going through a crisis. It wasn't there was a problem. It wasn't like I was trying to figure out the mysteries of life or anything else. He's just like, it just made sense one day. Jesus I thought, he's going to make my life better than without him. And it was that simple. And this person's an engineer and real smart. I mean, it wasn't like, they needed some kind of big, complicated thing. It's just when God's working in a person, simple is sometimes the best route. And so Paul is praying, I don't want to complicate it. I want to keep it simple. And so help me to do that. My agenda is open doors. My message is, man, the secret is that life isn't fulfilling apart from Christ. Christ fulfills life. And so pray for me. That's what he asks. And yet what he also knows in all of this, what we all probably know, is that we have to couple our witness to our words. It's not enough to say, pray for me, to have a simple message I can share with friends. Our life has to comport with the message that we share. And so to be a missional theologian, number 4 in your notes, theologians missionally need to leverage a savvy lifestyle. A savvy lifestyle. This is why he says in verse 5, walk in wisdom toward outsiders. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders. Again, this just means that the Jesus message has to be bolted to the Jesus life. It means that we, as we live our lives, we're seeking every day in every way, in every place we go, to represent Jesus to the world that we live in. And therefore, we have to be aware of the fact that we're inviting a certain level of critique. We're inviting people basically to watch our lives and see if we're different. And so in that light, we really do have to have a wise walk in life. And I experience this differently than maybe some of you being a pastor in this community. Where what I realize, and it doesn't bother me, it's not problematic in my thinking, but what I realize is that a lot of people, whether they like me, don't like me, whatever else, they kind of know somehow I'm a pastor in town. And so all the more I have to realize that every day I'm at Safeway, or every day I'm driving down, Main Street, or every day I go someplace, people that I don't even know who I am in essence. And I can't just be like, well, I get to be who I am Monday through Friday. On Sunday, I'll fake it and be Pastor Boy and call it good. Right? I have to think in terms of I have a witness all the time. And sometimes that is a bummer. Honestly, it's a bummer. Like a couple of examples. So one was somewhat recently, I'm coming up my gravel road, getting my garbage can, and I see a person I've never seen trimming bushes on my property. Like, that's weird, right? So trimming bushes right there on the road, and so I kind of stop, and I'm like, how's it going? And they proceed to be very upset with me about my bushes and things that things I didn't do, but I think they felt I did, and things I should have been thankful for that I didn't even know I was to be thankful for. It was like this whole blah, right? And at that moment, I'm going, I know what I want to say, right? I know what I want to do, but I think this is a new neighbor I've never met, and I have no doubt, knowing my road, that she knows that I'm a pastor, and so how do I handle this? And so she's just kind of upset. And so I stop and I go, you seem a little tense right now. She goes, well, maybe I am. I'm like, so let me back up. I would love to help with any concerns about bushes on the side of the road. I can do that for you. That's good. As to these other things, I didn't know. So thank you for being so helpful. And it was just like, I went that full-on thing, man. And it was like, and the whole time I'm going, if I say what I want to say, I will have bad relations with this neighbor, right? And they will see Jesus in a negative way. And that was the more important issue. And so to kind of step back and be like, okay, no, I gotta represent Jesus here. I gotta make sure that I don't give any extra ammunition, because it's not just against me, but then everybody at Redemption Church is gonna be like, our pastor is mean to people on his gravel road. Because it'd be on Facebook. All right, so right, so we all have to think that way. Right? I had something also recently. We were having a bunch of construction done at our house after our dishwasher leaked. And if you've ever had that kind of thing where you had like a catastrophic deal and your floor has to be all replaced and you're dealing with a contractor that you think is less than skilled for months, there's all kinds of moments in there that you want to just give a piece of your mind and a piece of your foot and, piece of your off-color vocabulary and everything. You want to just give pieces. And yet there I had to keep saying like, oh, wait, no, because they walk into our house and a good majority of them walk into our house, walk through the front door, they'd see a big sign that says, this house believes. And they'd say, believes what? And I'd be like, that Jesus is God, I won't chew you out now. Because I'm representing something, right? And so when Paul says we have to have a walk that's wise, we have to be wise in the fact that people are watching. That's one way that we have to be wise if we're going to be successful being missional theologians. The other way that I think we have to be wise, that Paul would be getting at too, is we have to know the people that we're running around with, the people that we work with, the people that are our neighbors. We have to understand how they think and where they take their information from and, kind of where they come from in culture and what their little corner of culture is for them. And we want to be students of our environment. We want to understand, where are they getting their information and how do they form their worldview? As much as we can, we want to kind of, again, get into their shoes so that we know kind of how they think, so we know how to communicate with them. That's just a homework assignment. But that's also how we walk wisely. We watch our own lifestyle and we try to understand the lifestyle of others. And we do this for a very critical reason. It's number 5. It's that we understand that time is precious. We understand that time is precious. This is why Paul says, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of time. People say time is money. I disagree. I think time is more expensive than money. It's more precious than money. You can go earn money. You can't earn time. Right? So time is kind of this big deal that we don't want to waste. In fact, what we want to do is leverage it. And to leverage it, here's the crazy thing. If you want to actually see a gain on your time in life, you actually have to spend your time to see a return, to see a gain on your time. You have to spend it. It means a lot of things. It may mean spending it with someone who needs Jesus. It may mean spending it with somebody who's hurting, spending it with somebody who's in need, spending it with somebody who's critical, spending it with somebody who is kind of confused in the things of life. We have to spend the time to redeem the time. But see, when you spend it in this world, you're just storing up reward in the next. You don't store up time because time is forevermore. You don't need time in eternity. But this time that we spend stores it up for the eternity that we get to then utilize that in. And so for us, it means we're either wasting our time or we're leveraging and using our time. And for Paul, he says, man, I don't want to waste a single minute. I don't want to waste a single opportunity, a single relationship. I want to figure out a way to communicate to people the core truth of what we believe. He says, I want to live the truth, but I want to share the grace. I'm going to embody a transformed life, but I want others to hear the message of grace that brings transformation. And so from that, he says in verse 6, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt. This means to be a missional theologian, we must speak in ways that are thoughtful. Thoughtful. Seasoned with salt. gracious. I love that. And here's why I love that. Sometimes we don't always have the reputation as evangelical Christians of being gracious, which is weird because the center of our message is what? Grace. I mean, it's kind of strange. Like, that should be the thing we're most known for. Like, oh man, those Christians are so gracious because their thing is grace. But sometimes we're not known for that. We're known for being fearful, or maybe we're known for being a little critical, right? Or any, just, there's probably a whole list of things that people might say. But Paul says, I just want to be known as being gracious, living the truth, but sharing the grace. 1 Peter chapter 3, this is what Peter says, Paul's friend. He says, in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is within you. Yet do this with gentleness and respect. See, we're not trying to win, we're simply trying to win over. We're not trying to tell, we're trying to share, right? We're not trying to force, we're trying to compel. This means we're displaying grace in all the opportunities that we have, gentleness and respect. And we want to do this in every context that we have the opportunity to do it in. So sometimes it may just be hanging out with a friend or a person or a coworker, that's true. But the other context that we speak a lot on as Christians is social media. And even in that context, we want to think in terms of, if I'm going to write something, I'm going to post something, I'm going to share something, is it gracious? Is it gracious? Is it respectful? Is it gentle? I confess, I have not always done that, right? Probably more notorious sharing an article where I go, oh, that's just funny. And there's a part of me that says, because it gives a barb at some other group that's not me. And then afterward, I'm like, that was stupid. That's stupid. I didn't earn any points with the people I'm trying to reach doing that, right? We need to be attractive more than abrasive. And so Paul says, man, just pray for me that I would have my conversation that would be gracious, and he says, seasoned with salt. Who likes salt in the room, right? That's the only reason McDonald's makes fries. The fries are for the salt, right? Salt isn't for the fries, right? So love me salt. I love salt. But here's the thing about salt. Salt's tricky, right? Too little salt, what happens? It's bland. Too much salt, it's overpowering, right? So you need the right blend, the right amount to make it fulfilling. And it's the same thing for then us in how we're thinking through how we share our faith. If we don't ever say anything to anybody, it's under-seasoned. It's just saltless. If we say, no, man, I don't want to be in that whole weird thing where I'm seen as the weird Christian friend, and so I don't do it, I don't say it, I just go under the radar, it's easier that way. That's just being saltless. Paul says, nah, we don't want to be saltless. At the same time, how many of you have ever met a really salty Christian? Like a salt-lick Christian, Like the Pez chunk of saltness, Like the stuff that comes on like the pretzels, too salty, right? So we don't want to be that either. We don't want to be that weirdo that everybody's like, whoa, here he comes. It's going to freak us out with like 17 Bible verses and something about the rapture. He's coming, We don't want to be that, right? We want to have the blend, right? We want to kind of have a sensitivity to how we go about things and how we communicate with people. And this means, number 7, to be missional theologians, we must think in ways that are skillful. Skillful. He says, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Again, this is where I go back to earlier when I said we have homework assignments, where we have to understand, hey, if I'm trying to reach out to a friend of mine, and I know his main news source is Trevor Noah and Comedy Central, then I understand this is where he's getting his news, and I want to be able to interact with that. So I'm going to watch Trevor Noah so I can understand my friend where this is where he gets his news. Doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree or whatever. You just go, I just want to understand that a little bit more. I want to still understand where they're coming from so that I can answer whatever questions they may have as it pertains to then issues of my faith as I'm sharing it. That's just the homework assignment here. Because different people come from different places, different histories, and have different baggage. Right? And so we want to kind of interact with them and understand them so we know how to answer them. And here's probably the most effective way, I think, of doing that. The best way you can figure out how to answer a person's questions, you ready? It's really simple. Ask them questions. Ask them questions, right? Don't assume you know everything about them, but rather ask them. So one of the best questions, this is like the price of admission right here. If you're trying to think about how to reach out to a friend, this one question will get you miles down the road. You simply say, why don't you tell me your story? Just ask them their story. I was recently brewing with my friend Ray Pitts, and we had another guy that was there at the brewery that's kind of running it now, and we had a bunch of downtime for something, and so I just said, hey, tell me your story. And he shared with me for like an hour his whole story. You know, and it was a hard story, and there was pain in that story, and, you know, he even admitted, he's like, I'm trying to kind of figure out life and everything else, and so just saying, hey, tell me your story. That will give you an open door for all sorts of things, because once a person starts sharing about their story, you might find a way to share something of your story in there as well. It's a great way to do it. Maybe the question's a little different. Maybe it's not simply share with me your story. Maybe your question is, tell me, what are the problems you may have with religion? What would be your hang-ups with church? I know we have to kind of have a stiff spine on that one a little bit, like we have to be okay with the criticism, but I find it hugely valuable to go, man, you know, are you religious? And they go, no, I'm not religious. Why aren't you religious? I'd love to hear that. Well, here's why. There's this, and this. And what you find oftentimes in that arc of conversation is that some of the things that they think, you go, that's not rooted in the reality of things. And so you go, like, hey, you know, you said that. Can I share with you, like, in our church, it's not like that, or I don't know anybody really like that. Can you help me out on that, or whatever else? There's going to be other things that they share with you, and you go, yep, I agree, that's dumb. I feel you. I think Christians have done some dumb stuff, and we've made some mistakes. And you can almost use it as an opportunity to say, will you forgive us? I'm asking you to forgive us because we do some dumb stuff sometimes. That's a great opportunity as well. But it's just asking questions. Maybe it's inviting them to church and say, hey, why don't you come with me to church? And then, you know what, afterwards you can tell me which parts you liked, which parts you didn't like, and which parts were confusing. You know, they're going to go, I don't know about plastic to pay it with money. That's dumb. Yeah, this is why we do it, though. And then it's an opportunity to give clarity or insight, right? But it all comes back to the same thing, which is what? Answering each one. Answering each one. And so this is where we want our heart to be, right? To operate in grace, operate in gentleness, operate in respect, operate in understanding, having a life that comports with the message, and then we ask questions and look for the opportunity. And so what does this mean for all of us then? How does this round out into a home? Well, I think for us it means every one of us, if we're going to be missional theologians, must have, number 8, a person in mind. We must have a person in mind. We can't simply be parishioners. We need to be practitioners of our faith. And so part of this says, all right, if I'm to be praying for open doors and I'm to be looking for opportunities, I'm to wire my life around this, then all right, Jesus, who is the person that I know you want me to try to figure out how I can ask that question of tell me your story, or what do you think about religion, or invite them to church, or just try to even start some kind of relationship where maybe you're not talking anything about faith early on, but you just go, it's an intentional relationship. I want to figure out a way, I want to pray toward an open door to connect with this person. Every one of us should have that person in our thinking. Every one of us. And this is what I love about the end of Colossians. No sooner does Paul talk about how to answer each one. There's this whole list. I think we have a slide for it of names. Tychicus, Onesimus, Barnabas, Epaphras, Demas, Nympha. You know, all these different names are at the end of the letter. Right? It's just a bunch of thank you and don't forget this person and remember that person and tell this person this. Here's what I love about that in light of him saying each one. No sooner does he say each one that he lists a bunch of people. Right? Each one of these persons at some point was a person that had a reason not to believe. Every one of these names at some point was a person that was estranged from Christ. Every single one of these persons at some point had baggage, had some resistance maybe to things of God, had a completely different lifestyle, doing crazy things. When your name is Nympha, you probably have a dangerous past, right? I'm guessing. So, there would be plenty of hard hearts in this list. But what was true of this list is that there was someone that came into each of these persons' lives. And they said, I'm going to live what Jesus called me to live. I'm going to pray for the opportunity. I'm going to take the opportunity when it arrives. I'm going to know how to answer each one. And from that, each one of these people went from not knowing Jesus to knowing Jesus. We don't know their backstories. But somehow something happened because somebody shared. Now, here's my thing to you. Who was the one person in your life that was the one that shared with you? Who was that person that embodied it, that communicated it, that really took the time to ask a question, answer a question, whatever? Who's that person that invited you to church? Whatever it is, who is that one person? I want you to remember that one person and think how grateful you are that that one person shared with you. I want you to lock that in, because then the next thing is that thing that says, all right, now who is that one person that Jesus is laying on your heart that you would share with them, that you would do what that other person did in your life? Who's that one? Now, I know that this can be intimidating. I know it can be kind of daunting. I know it's like, man, how do I even begin at times? And again, it's an awkward thing, especially in the current climate. We know that religion is seen a little bit more suspiciously than maybe it used to be even a decade ago. Well, this is where we want to make sure we don't just say, hey, you should go do stuff, and we don't try to help, right? And so we always talk about next steps as a church, and we have a little tile on our app for next steps, and we always try to think through, like, what are helpful things that we can put there that are giving you something so that you would have a resource or a tool. And one of the things we've worked through for a number of months now as a staff is saying, we know that people are busy. We know that a lot of things are going on in your lives, and how can we get more information to you because you are busy? And so one of the things we came up with, and we're launching tomorrow, is a podcast that we put together as a church. I'm the host of the podcast, and it's called The Everyday Missionary. And the Everyday Missionary podcast is simply just like 20 to 30 minutes long, and it's little ideas once a week. They'll come out once a week, so you can subscribe to it or whatever. It's also going to be on the app and that kind of thing. But you can say, hey, I want to get the information on that podcast. You can click that, and we're going to send that out to you tomorrow. But it's just these little nuggets of reminder, encouragement, ways to answer tough questions in easy ways. I mean, that's the whole thing. And what's great about a podcast is that you can listen to this when you're on the road, you're commuting, you're at your child's practice. Ladies, if you're getting ready in the morning, you can listen to a podcast while you're getting ready. That's a great place to do it. There's all sorts of little venues where you can double dip, you can kind of multitask as you're listening to a podcast. So this is our way of getting information to you that isn't another class or simply another thing to read, but a way that you can listen weekly as a reminder and encouragement and stimulation on how we can be everyday missionaries, right? To our culture, culture to the culture. And so if you would like that resource, man, we want to get it to you. Another thing is a book all about the mission of God, joining God's mission, right? Being just everyday missionaries in the space that God has for us. And so maybe you go, I want to read something on this too. I want to listen to the podcast, but I also want to read something. Man, let us know. Click that, and we would love to get that to you. But maybe some of you are here today, and you're like, you know what? I'm hearing all of this about reaching people for Jesus. I haven't been reached for Jesus. I don't know Jesus, and I want to follow him. I've been coming, listening, paying attention, asking questions, and I'm at that place where I want to know him in that way. We would love to know that, because, again, that's as simple as you saying, Jesus, I submit my life to you. I want to follow you now, and then you just begin to follow him. You confess, man, I have gone my own way, done my own thing, been estranged from you, but you have brought me to yourself. Man, I want to just follow you. You make that your heartfelt prayer, whatever words you choose. That's really the stepping in to life with Jesus. And we would love to know that you're making that decision today. And so you can type that on the app there in that little box, or you can meet me at the door after the service. I'll be right out here greeting people. You can do that. Whatever it is, we just want to know. Because we really do around here believe that life with Jesus is better. And we would love to hear that you began that life with him. So we're all called to share. We're all called to reach. We're all called to be different because we're called to be culture to the culture. Let's pray together. Jesus, I thank you for today. I thank you for your grace and your goodness. Thank you for your message and your word. And I thank you that you have brought us into new life with you. so that we might share new life with others. May we be faithful to that because we are loyal to you. In your perfect name, amen.